They say thunder comes before the storm. But what if the storm is a woman, riding bareback across windswept cliffs, her hair aflame with vengeance and eyes sharper than Roman steel? What if her scream becomes the war cry of a dying empire? Sit tight, you're not just stepping into history, you're galloping into a firestorm. Before you press play and settle in, make sure you're somewhere quiet but not too quiet. You'll want to hear the wind change as we go. And hey, if you end up loving this ride, hit that follow button like it owes you a favor. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time the rebels rise in your part of the world. Now, imagine your first breath drawn not beneath a palace dome, but under a roof of reeds, smoke trailing lazily through a hole punched in the sky. The ground beneath you isn't marble, it's stubborn, honest dirt. You're not cradled in silk, but wrapped in wool that still smells of sheep. Outside, the wind sings a lullaby of wolves and war. Inside, your mother hums something older than time. You were born not in a kingdom, but in a frontier. A liminal space, at the edge of what would one day be called Britannia, though to you it's just life. A place where trees whisper secrets, rivers remember your name, and the fog doesn't hide things, it reveals them. You don't measure distance in miles, but in how many songs it takes to walk home. Your people, the ironborn of the East, they call you Nara. It means flame, not because of your hair, but because of what they see in your eyes. You're the youngest daughter of a land where girls are raised to ride like wind and fight like hunger. You learn early. The world doesn't owe you kindness. You have to snatch it with bloodied hands. While other children are sewing tunics, you're wrestling goats and winning. Your spear training starts the same week you lose your first tooth. Your father watches proudly. Daughters are the spine, he says. Sons are just the meat. From the elders you hear stories not written in books, but spoken like spells, of queens who defied kings, of rivers that drowned cowards, of gods with elk antlers and wolf mouths. Your favorite tale is of a girl who stared a Roman centurion in the eye and made him blink first. You want to be her. You want to be all of them. But the world is shifting. The stories carry warnings now. Strangers have landed down Southmen in strange skins, their feet wrapped in shining metal, their tongues slicing through your language like dull knives. They don't ask for paths. They carve them. They cut trees your people pray to and call it progress. They plant flags where your ancestors buried bones. But they are distant shadows for now. You focus on your people, on the talk around your neck, copper twisted like fate, passed down from the line of wild women before you. You're told it marks you for greatness. You hope it's true. You pretend you don't believe in omens. But sometimes, when thunder strikes twice in the same night, you wonder if it's calling your name. As you grow, so does your understanding of power. Your people don't hold elections. They forge leaders in fire. You're not handed a crown, you earn one with grit, guts, and a good right hook. You listen to debates that feel more like duels, where every word is sharpened like a blade. You learn to navigate politics the way you navigate thorn bushes carefully, and never without a knife. Your training is unrelenting. While Roman boys study arithmetic and grammar, you're learning how to silence a man 3 times your size with a broken antler and a well-placed kick. One of your trainers, a woman with only one eye and a laugh like thunder, teaches you that fear isn't weakness. It's a blade. Use it right, she says, and it'll cut deeper than rage. Your horse, if you can call that ornery creature a horse, is more scar tissue than mane. She bites, kicks, and once dragged a cousin through 3 hedgerows. You adore her. You name her Shade. Together, you ride until the horizon blurs. You learn the land the way others learn lullabies. But not all learning comes from pain. There are nights of song, of dancing by firelight, of stolen glances and whispered dreams. There are stories passed between fingers, laughter that breaks like dawn. Love grows in this soil too, twisted among the roots of survival. And then the druids come, wrapped in mystery and moss, speaking in riddles, arguing with trees. They claim you are marked. By whom, you ask? One grins like the moon. By what, he says, not who. You don't sleep well that night, but you walk taller the next day. Eventually, you marry. It's a match that makes sense on parchment but surprises even the spirits. His name is Aelor. He's no fool, and certainly no coward. He smiles like a man who's read the end of the story and knows it's going to hurt. He's king of your people now, though he rules with wary eyes and half-truths. Rome is too close for honesty. Because Rome doesn't always conquer with swords. Sometimes it uses contracts written in languages designed to confuse and tax collectors who smile while robbing you. A generation ago, your land was promised safety in exchange for loyalty. A truce that sounds better on scrolls than in screams. Aelor plays their game for now. He hosts Roman envoys who wear more gold than sense and can't tell a sacred grove from a goat pen. You nod politely when they mispronounce your name. You only smile with your mouth, never your eyes. But you never forget who you are. You are Nara, flame, and you are not here to be remembered as someone's footnote. You are the beginning of a different kind of legend, one that scorches maps, rewrites boundaries, and dares Rome to remember your name, not in glory, but in fear. The fire didn't go out. It moved into a bigger house. You live now in what outsiders might call a hall, but to you it's still a roundhouse, just with thicker walls, sharper tools, and more eyes watching. Imported jugs line the shelves, carrying oils and spices that smell of faraway empires. There's a bronze mirror on the wall, a gift from a Roman official who smiled too wide and stood too close. You smiled back. You nearly gave him your axe instead. Your guests wear armor that gleams like threats. They speak in voices soaked in superiority, smelling faintly of rosemary and conquest. They laugh politely at your customs. You serve them wine. You host their diplomats. You even manage to pretend the word friend doesn't taste like ash when you say it. But you never forget. Never forget the sound of steel unsheathing, the cold feel of bone handles, the burn of the forge. This, too, is war just spoken with softer syllables. So you play the role. You nod at the right times. You laugh at bad jokes. You wear the fine wool garments they send as diplomatic bribes and let them believe you are tamed. But inside, you measure every word like it's a weapon, because it is. Your husband, Caelan king in name, tactician in truth, walks the razor's edge. He trades with Rome. He smiles at their governors. But behind that smile is a man calculating every step like a battlefield. He's not naive. He doesn't trust the hands he shakes. Neither do you. Together you rule a tribe still standing, neither conquered nor openly rebellious. Caged, perhaps, but not broken. Your people murmur. Your warriors wait. Your children. Your daughters grow like storm clouds, quick and charged with fury. You teach them not to bow, not to beg. They practice swordplay at dawn and philosophy by dusk. They ask questions most adults fear. They do not smile when Romans pass by. You're proud. Then, like rot in a root, illness creeps in. Caelan fades slowly, his strength pooling at the edges like rainwater in a cracked bowl. You watch helplessly as the fire dims. He knows what's coming, and he knows what Rome does when a king dies without a plan. So he tries to be clever. He drafts a will, carefully, cautiously. It names Rome as co-heir to your land, alongside you and your daughters. Not a surrender. A gesture. An offering wrapped in legality, soaked in hope. A bridge between blood and empire. But Rome doesn't cross bridges. Rome burns them. He dies one morning, softly, without drama. You bury him with stone and song. His talk rests beside him, the same one he gave you on your wedding day, etched with quiet promises. You place it on the altar and do not cry, not because grief hasn't come, but because you're bracing for what comes next. And it does, faster than you expect. The Romans arrive, not draped in mourning but in smugness, scrolls in one hand, arrogance in the other. They enter your village as if it were theirs. They do not offer comfort. They do not kneel before the dead. They speak only of debts, inheritance, taxes, power. They ignore Caelan's will, conveniently, deliberately. The parchment naming your daughters as co-heirs is deemed invalid. Their logic is simple. Women do not rule, not here, not anywhere Rome's shadow falls. They take everything. The grain silos, the armories, the sacred groves. Even your household, the very house you once filled with firelight and strategy, becomes theirs. You are told, not asked, that your land is now under direct Roman governance. You ask why. They answer in Latin and smirks. You try reason. You cite their own laws, their own precedents. They chuckle. Then, one night, they return this time, not with scribes, but soldiers. Not an army. Just enough to remind you who's in charge. They pull down your banners. They drag you from your home. They beat you in the square, where your people gather like shadows, unable to interfere. Your daughters are held back, forced to watch. What they suffer, you will never describe it. Not aloud. Some wounds are too sacred for sound. You are the queen of your people, and they strip you bare before them. You do not scream, not yet. You bleed, you break. But something deeper refuses to die. They think this is justice, a correction, a warning. You know what it is. It is humiliation dressed as policy. That night, you cradle your daughters with trembling arms. They do not cry. They stare not in horror, but in realization. They are too young to understand Rome's politics, but old enough to recognize power when it tries to destroy something sacred. And they see something older awaken in you, something the Romans never understood. Purposeful fury. The elders beg restraint. They plead for silence. Survive, they whisper. Endure. You do not answer. You rise. Quietly. Slowly. Not in defiance, but in declaration. Because this isn't just about you, or your daughters, or your village. This is about the land, the gods, the bones beneath the soil. Rome may have beaten you, but they forgot something essential. You're still breathing. And that is their fatal mistake. They didn't make a martyr. They made a monster, a necessary one. You return to the council halls. You speak little. You listen more. You gather whispers like kindling. Other tribes, distant cousins and ancient rivals, have stories of similar offences. The Trial, the Darnic, the Selans, all pushed, all bruised, all watching. Rome sees you as scattered. You see yourselves as seeds. You begin speaking in symbols: the bear whose cubs were taken, the fire beneath the ice, the woman who smiles before the storm. You don't preach rebellion. You offer vengeance as a right. The women answer first, then the old warriors, then the young. You train in caves, in forests, in the broken halls Rome left behind. Spears are reforged, swords are oiled, arrows kissed with fire. The druids begin singing again, but this time, it's not for peace. The trees listen. So do the ghosts. The stars begin to shift. You weave iron into your daughter's braids. You wear war paint not to frighten, but to remember. And one morning you stand before the river, its surface still as glass. You look down and see your reflection. Not a widow, not a queen, but something else. A reckoning. Rome thought it was done with you. They don't know they've just named their executioner. They gave you pain thinking it would silence you. What they actually handed you was fuel, something every empire should fear its enemies finding. A reason. The wound has never closed. It just began to bleed forward. You don't stand atop hills giving dramatic speeches. Not at first. You don't need to. The world has seen your scars. Your people have seen what they did to your daughters. That is your banner. Your call to arms is written in bruises, not ink. But revolution demands more than rage. It needs movement, momentum. And so you mount your war chariot, iron wheels biting into the earth like fangs, and ride. From village to village, across frostbitten hills and through valleys thick with old gods, you go not as a queen in silks, but as a storm in wolf's fur. Your hair untamed, lips chapped by cold winds, and your eyes, well, some say they burn like embers. You've never confirmed it. Why ruin a good myth? Fear, after all, travels quicker than truth. You don't romanticize war. You don't wrap your fury in poetry. When you speak, it's clear, cold, and sharp. You name the taxes, the ones that bled your kin dry. You name the sacred groves that were chopped into firewood. You name the gods Rome insulted. You name the daughters Rome tried to silence. The first to stand beside you are the triune old enemies of the empire. Then come others, tribes that once distrusted your rule now see you not as a monarch, but as wrath given a heartbeat. Vengeance on horseback. Memory becomes your weapon. Your speeches are firebrands. You remind them of the old ways, the stolen lands, the shame. And shame is a torch no Roman can put out once it's passed hand to hand. You mark your skin in blue. Not just war paint, this is a ritual, a shedding, a rebirth. You are no longer the woman who was dragged through the dirt. You are the storm she became. They begin arriving in numbers. Peasants with pitchforks, warriors with heirloom axes, seers who mutter to trees, elders who cannot walk but still come to give what they have: food, beasts, blessings, fury. Even the broken offer strength. Your daughters ride beside you, not for appearance, but because they are the future made flesh. They do not wave, they glare. They do not wait, they charge. Their presence is a spell. Unbroken bloodline, unbent spirit. Word of you, of her the wild queen of the northern isles, begins drifting to Roman ears. At first, they scoff. Let the barbarian woman have her tantrum, they sneer over cups of imported wine. Then their scouts return, with maps, with numbers, with panic behind their eyes. And suddenly, no one is laughing anymore. Rome always assumed the tribes of Britannia would never unite, that they were too busy squabbling, too scattered, too tribal. Rome didn't understand that when every hand bears the same burn, every scar tells the same story. Suddenly, it's not about borders, it's about rage. And rage unites. From hills and forests and coastlines they come, hundreds, then thousands, clad in patchwork hides, painted skin, handmade armor. Some have never held weapons. Some haven't let go of theirs in decades. There are children who follow you barefoot, believing in something they can't name, and elders who thought they'd never see war again. One boy, barely taller than a sheepdog, approaches your camp, dragging a slingshot made from his father's old belt. You don't send him home. You nod, because this is no longer a rebellion. This is Judgment Day. Rome begins calling you Mulieris Terra, the terror of a woman. The name spreads. Whispered intense, muttered behind legion walls, half joke, half warning. You hope it stains their sleep. Your camp swells into a temporary kingdom, a roaming city. Merchants arrive with carts of bread and javelins. Trinkets appear, crude little amulets shaped like you in a chariot, daughters at your sides. Bards sing of your fury before you've even struck your first blow. Everyone wants to believe they are part of something eternal. You keep it from spiraling into chaos. You assign scouts, field leaders, messengers. No tribe left leaderless. No unit left confused. You teach order not because it's Roman, but because it works. And nothing scares empires more than the idea that those they once considered savages have learned how to march. The nights are loud. The druids chant ancient verses that curl the firelight. They sing to the spirits buried under centuries. You bless the weapons, some in pig's blood, some less innocent. You don't ask. This isn't a time for dainty rules. The Romans later claim you command over 100. 0. You never counted. You felt them. The pressure behind your back like an oncoming wave, like thunder held together by bone and spite. Your daughters sleep beside you under a shared bear pelt. You watch them, faces calm, lashes still. In the day they fight like queens. In sleep they are still your babies, but they are also your legacy. And then you choose the first target, Camulodunum, a former tribal stronghold now warped into a Roman model colony. It stands fat with stolen marble, polished courtyards, statues of emperors who've never breathed this cold air. They've even built a temple to Emperor Claudius, a man long dead, as if his ghost can police your gods. They call it holy. You call it an insult carved in stone. You don't sneak up. You want them to see you coming. Scouts glimpse your army as a cloud of dust swallowing the horizon, a tremor in the fields. You are too many to hide, and too angry to try. The Romans in Camulodunum panic. There is no legion stationed here, just retired soldiers, their families, bureaucrats who once felt safe behind Roman law. They clutch old swords and dented shields. Some try to hold speeches. You're not here for speeches. You offer no warning, no delay. Only war. Your army crashes into the city like a tidal wave soaked in fire. Gates fall in moments. Temples crumble. Villas are pulled down. The chariots slice through stone like it's thatch. You ride in the center, not commanding from behind, but tearing through from the front. The spear in your hand doesn't shake. You don't hesitate. There is no hesitation in justice. Columns fall. Statues split. Roads once polished with Roman sandals run slick with consequence. The temple of Claudius, reduced to ash and shattered bronze. Rome thought you would beg. You burned their answer into the soil. The screams echo through narrow alleys, terrified Roman settlers, scrambling like ants as your warriors tear down the city they thought was theirs. You hear them beg. You hear them cry for mercy. You remember begging once too, but not today. The last to fall is the temple of Claudius Rome's sacred insult carved into your homeland. They barricade themselves inside, clutching statues and muttering prayers to marble gods. You watch the fire take hold slowly. 2 days it burns, not from resistance, but from the fire's own hunger, consuming every stone with the same deliberate fury that lives in your bones. By the third sunrise, Camulodunum is gone. Ashes don't lie. Cities do. Rome didn't just lose a colony. It lost its illusion, the pretense that these islands had been tamed. This wasn't a rival empire that took a Roman stronghold. It was the very people they claimed to own, the ones they thought were already bent. You stand amidst the wreckage, smoke tangled in your wolfskin cloak. Your daughters pick through the rubble, pulling charred pieces of bronze from the broken temple. Not for souvenirs, for trophies. Proof that power can bleed. You let them. They have earned the right to carry something heavy. But there's no time to linger. The next name on your list is bigger, bolder, far more Roman. Londinium. You don't pause to celebrate. The news spreads faster than your horses. Flames tend to do that. And now Rome knows. But Rome reacts too slowly. Your army rides south not like an army, but like an omen, toward Londinium, the glimmering artery of Roman Britain. Young, rich, bloated with gold and wine and arrogance. It hums with trade, laughs in Latin, builds temples to emperors it's never seen. They call it the future. You call it a cancellation waiting to happen. Along the roads, citizens flee. Panic runs ahead of you like a screaming wind. You don't chase them. Fear is your best herald. Let them run. Every wagon creaking westward is another whisper of your coming. When refugees outrun the soldiers, you know you're winning. By the time you see Londinium's outer fields, there's no defense waiting. No red-cloaked wall of order, just smoke curling lazily toward the sky, and a city trying to pretend it's not already dead. Governor Gaius Suetonius Paulinus, the hard-faced man sent to put down a different rebellion in the west, has returned. He saw your numbers, your banners, your fire-blackened sky. And then, in the truest Roman tradition, he ran. Not to retreat, to preserve the province, he will later claim. You suspect he simply didn't want to watch the future burn. And Londinium? Londinium is open. The streets once made for parades now stretch like empty veins. Market stalls that sold oils and exotic sweets are torn down and set ablaze. Warehouses, baths, villas all fall to ruin. Some stay behind. A few too proud, too slow, too trusting in Rome's protection. You give one warning. Leave now, or be judged by the gods, yours and mine. Many ignore it. And history will call it a massacre. The Romans will count the corpses, cry out in horror, tally the dead in scrolls soaked with blame. They say tens of thousands perished. Maybe they did. But what you know is this. You were once invisible. Now the world cannot look away. Among the smoke and debris, you find a ledger, half-burned. A record of names and debts, scrawled in neat Latin columns. The names of those who owed Rome their lives. You drop it in the fire without blinking. Let that ledger burn like the rest. No temples are spared this time. No more mercy for statues. No more tolerance for marble gods who watched silently as your daughters were torn apart. You tear them down with your own hands. That night, Londinium sleeps in smoke. Your army rides out at dawn, larger, louder, hungrier. Behind you lies a city that once glittered like promise. Now it's only dust and memory. Next, Verulamium. If Camulodunum was arrogant, and Londinium proud, then Verulamium is downright smug. Built with ambition and Roman coin, paved with imported stone, dressed in fountains and mosaics, a shrine to assimilation. It didn't just surrender to Rome, it volunteered. This one, you burn for what it represents. By now, your name arrives ahead of your riders. Verulamium's elite have already packed their silver gods and ledgers full of owed grain and bolted west. You let them go. Vengeance, you've learned, doesn't chase. It waits. And when it arrives, it doesn't knock. What you find in Verulamium isn't resistance. It's a vacuum. The soldiers? Gone. The lords and tacksmen? Vanished. What remains are the doubters, the ones who believed your legend couldn't be real. That no mother, no tribal queen, no woman could bend an empire backward. You show them otherwise. The gates fall open like rotted teeth. Your warriors flood the streets. The air thickens with smoke and old prayers. The bathhouses hiss and crack. Statues weep bronze tears. Market stalls melt. In the town square, a scroll flutters from a burning building. It lands near your boots. You glance down. It's full of numbers, ledgers, lists of tribute. You chuckle once a grim, joyless sound and toss it into the fire, because this isn't just about destroying a city. It's about reducing what that city stood for to cinders. Verulamium was meant to be Rome's experiment, a shining example of how the barbarian could be domesticated, taught to sip wine instead of swing swords, taught to pray in Latin instead of howl at the moon, taught to obey. And now it's smoke. By the third day, it's done. You've reduced 3 Roman cities to rubble. You've buried their architecture in ash. You've torn their future off the map. Your army grows with every ruined town. Some join out of fury, others out of fear. Some simply have nowhere else to go. You don't ask their reasons. You ride forward, but you feel it now, not regret, never that, but weight, a weight of momentum, of consequence, of war growing faster than control. The army is vast, glorious, but bloated, too many mouths, too much plunder, too little discipline. The chariots groan under their own trophies. The fires burn higher than you intended. The gods have had their offerings. Camulodunum, Londinium, Verulamium. 3 Roman cities turned to ash. You've written your declaration not in ink, but in blood and stone. And Rome has started to sharpen its teeth. Governor Paulinus isn't retreating anymore. He's planning, digging in, calling what's left of the legions. The final clash is approaching. The tide you summoned is reaching the edge of the sea. You ride through the wreckage now, boots soaked in soot. The air tastes of charred empire. And ahead, the storm breaks again, this time not from your will, but from Rome's fury. They thought they could silence you. Instead, they taught you how to roar. The spoils of war glitter, stolen pottery, goblets still sticky with Roman wine, tunics draped over shoulders like trophies from a broken god. Some of your warriors no longer carry spears, they carry wine jugs. Laughter echoes like a battle drum, wild and loud, and still they chant your name. But the sound has changed. It no longer whispers revenge. It roars of movement, myth, momentum. And momentum, once unleashed, doesn't ask where it's going. It doesn't stop. It only grows heavier, louder, harder to steer. You begin to hear murmurs. When does it end? Why haven't we marched on the real forts? Where's the next treasure? Justice has believers. But treasure? Treasure breeds investors. And investors want dividends. The Druids feel the shift. They press you for grounding rituals. Offer prayers to anchor the cause before it collapses under its own weight. You nod. You agree. You understand. But you say little. Because even you feel it now. The tilt. You still ride in front. Still carry the same spear. Your daughter's tougher now. Jaws clenched like warriors never leave your side. But when sleep finally drapes over their eyes, you stare into the fire and count the days since this all began. You thought vengeance would burn sweet. Instead, It tastes like blood and smoke, a bitter brew that never cools. And Rome? Rome is no longer reacting. Rome is organizing. Suetonius, that cold-jawed general you once mocked, is back from the western hills. This time not with excuses, but with a proper army. Veterans, disciplined, clean lines and calloused hands. The kind who do not flinch at war cries or shatter at the sight of blue-painted faces. He's chosen his battleground well. A narrow gorge, hills flanking both sides, trees thick behind, no room to circle, no angles to exploit, no open plain for your wild riders to sweep in with their chaos. You've burned cities, but cities don't fight back. Now, you face soldiers, real ones, men who stand in silence, who form ranks like iron walls, who fought in Africa, Gaul, and beyond. They've bled for the eagle, they've watched gods die. You have the numbers, tens of thousands, but he has geometry, formation, patience. The druids say the omens are still with you, but omens don't hold the line when javelins fly. You've marched forward so long that the very idea of resistance feels strange, but now you see it. Rome is done retreating. This field is not just dirt, it's a trap. You arrive with the horizon at your back. A sea of bodies, chants, banners, farmers, warriors, mystics, slaves, boys gripping kitchen knives, women with their hair tied in braids of war. You outnumber Rome more than 10 to 1. You expect another city to fall, but something is wrong. The Romans don't move, don't tremble, don't prepare speeches or fall back to higher ground. They just stand, unyielding, shields like walls, spears bristling like thorns. You cannot see their eyes, only their discipline. You raise your blade, your daughters to your left and right, expressions carved in fire and fury. You scream to the heavens a vow, a warning, a final challenge. Then you charge. The ground shakes, thousands scream, and the Roman wall does not flinch. Your front lines slam into theirs like ocean surf against a cliff. Over and over. Spears shatter, shields bend. The noise is thunder, made flesh. But the line holds. The valley betrays you. There's no room to turn, no path to retreat, no air between bodies. Your numbers, once your strength, trap you. Your army becomes a crowd. Your army becomes a stampede. And then Rome moves. Their counterattack isn't fast. It's precise. A slow, serrated grind. Columns that split your ranks open. Cavalry that arcs in like blades drawn from the forest. Wedges of iron slicing your rebellion into ribbons. What began as glory becomes panic. You scream for your daughters, for your warriors. You try to push forward. The press of bodies is too much. Your chariot jams. The wheels grind into corpses. You never imagined this. Not like this. The sky darkens again, not with smoke, but with spears. This isn't a battle. It's a reversal. Rome has remembered who it is. And it's had enough of your fire. You refuse to leave. Even as men fall beside you, blood choking the air. Even as druids drop, their chants lost beneath the clash of steel. Even as the wind carries not flame, but the black feathers of crows. You dismount. Your chariot, the symbol of your uprising, cannot go further. You walk. Your boots crush ash and blood. You find your daughters not by sight, but by instinct. They are still alive, battered, bloodied, breathing. You pull them close, forehead to forehead, no words. Only fire shared in silence. The field becomes a grave. Some of your fighters are trampled, some cut down, some flee into the woods. The Romans do not chase. They don't need to. Their victory is exact, efficient, a warning carved in blood and silence. You brought them a wave. They met it with a dam, and the dam held. You leave only when you must into the trees, quiet, invisible again. You find a hollow where the world goes silent. Beneath the arms of a twisted yew, you settle. The ground breathes slow. So do you. This wasn't just a defeat. It was the end of something older than empire. The gods you prayed to. The dream that this land could be its own. That a woman could rage, and the world would finally listen. They will write that you took poison beneath that tree, that you chose to die with honor rather than adorn a Roman parade. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. No one living truly knows. What matters is this: you didn't kneel, you didn't die quietly. You stood, you screamed, you burned, and in doing so, you left a scar Rome would never erase. The empire would write its own version of events. Of course it would, but even Governor Suetonius, stone-faced, victorious, would later admit, your rebellion came terrifyingly close to breaking Rome's grip on this island. And long after your name is written in ash, they will still remember how you made the empire bleed. You were never just a queen. You were a storm walking in human skin, thunder behind your eyes, lightning in your fists. And even after your bones return to the soil, your name doesn't lie quiet. It echoes through fire, through rebellion, through every woman who refuses to sit down when told. The battlefield has gone still now. The air stinks of blood and iron. Suetonius, Rome's iron governor, stalks through the wreckage. His men strip corpses, gather weapons, make neat piles of the dead tidy columns of chaos. It's practical. Grim. A Roman kind of worship. History, after all, must be catalogued. And before your blood dries, Rome's already writing your ending. They call it a victory. Of course they do. As if you were just another skirmish. A revolt to footnote. They say you died with honor, or without. That you poisoned yourself. That illness claimed you. That you vanished into the mist and became a legend whispered by wolves. Tacitus says one thing. Dio says another. The scrolls do what they always do, they bend. Rome likes conclusions. They need neat endings. And you? You refuse to give them one. Your daughters vanish from the records entirely, which, of course, means they terrified the empire. Their silence is a confession. Britain remains under Roman rule, but not the same rule. No more temples to Claudius. No more smug declarations of destiny. Instead, garrisons, fortified towns, nervous glances over every shoulder. Rome won, yes, but now it rules with one eye, always watching the forests. They'll pretend you were a moment, an anomaly, a mad queen with too much rage and too little sense. But cities don't burn in moments, and nations don't rise for anomalies. You didn't just rebel, you became the one thing Rome couldn't conquer, a myth. Years pass. Centuries roll over. Rome crumbles, as all empires do. Brick by brick, god by god it falls. But your name survives. It weaves through the trees in whispers. It's scratched onto stones, sung across smoky halls, murmured beside fires lit in defiance. They call you queen, goddess, warrior mother, blood and bronze. The Victorians, lovers of sentiment and spectacle, will raise a statue of you in the heart of London. Bronze wheels frozen mid-turn, daughters beside you. A chariot paused just before the charge. A monument not to you, but to the you they needed. Inspiring, noble, sanitized. You don't mind, because real myths don't die in bronze. They simmer. Even once the fire burns out, the heat remains. In every uprising, your shadow lingers. In every street where boots rise in protest, your footsteps echo. In every woman told to stay small, quiet, forgettable, there is a whisper. Boudica did not. They tried to bury your story beneath rubble and red ink. But the earth never stopped shifting. You are not gone. You are rooted. And the ash you left behind? Fertile. Let's begin again with smoke. Not a firestorm this time, but something gentler, slower, sacred. A ribbon of silver curling upward, delicate and persistent, threading its way through the air of a silent chamber. The kind of space built not for noise, but for memory. We're no longer in Britannia. We've left the ash and fury behind. We are somewhere older. A temple, a shrine, maybe Mesopotamia, perhaps Egypt, or a tucked-away sanctuary in ancient India. It doesn't matter, not really. What matters is this. Here, scent is sacred. Perfume isn't indulgence. It's divinity. Barefoot priests glide across polished stone, carrying bronze censers or clay bowls filled with coals that pulse like the breath of the gods. On them, they sprinkle beads of hardened resin gifts from far-off lands. Frankincense, sharp and citrus, myrrh, dark and earthy, like forgotten tombs. The moment resin hits ember, it hisses, sizzles, releases its soul. The air thickens, no longer just something to breathe, but something to feel. The smoke curls up toward the rafters, toward heaven, a message written in vapor. In Egypt, they went further still. There was kefi, a perfume, so elaborate it bordered on alchemy. A symphony of ingredients: wine, raisins, honey, juniper, cinnamon, and secrets. It wasn't prepared by daylight, but at dusk when the world softened, and the scents could rise like prayers. Kefi wasn't just burned, it was lived, mixed with reverence, burned with intent, inhaled with devotion. It was believed to calm the gods and the dead. In India, the smoke of sandalwood and camphor does something similar. In ancient Greece, temples burned sweet resins to rise with hymns. In early Israelite rites, incense was precise. Divine fragrance had formulas. Too much, or mixed wrongly, and the sacred became dangerous. Why all this care? Why so much ceremony for scent? Because smell is the invisible path. It lingers where statues fall. It travels where songs can't reach. It touches the soul when the eyes are closed and the mouth has no words left. To the ancients, that made it divine. The temples smelled holy not only during worship but always, even when empty. The very air itself was an offering. And if a place could smell holy, maybe, just maybe, a person could too. So now, breathe in as if you stood there, in the flickering light of some long crumbled sanctuary. Inhale the sacred, exhale the past, and drift eastward with me, to Egypt, to the breeze off the Mediterranean, thick with salt and sandalwood, to Alexandria, jewel of the Nile, a place of scrolls and secrets. And there, on a rooftop soaked in golden light, Cleopatra, queen, alchemist, strategist, siren. She didn't wear perfume like an accessory. She crafted it like a spell. Cleopatra understood something emperors never quite did. The nose remembers. Long after words fade, long after gold dulls, scent lingers. She didn't just use perfume to seduce. She used it to dominate memory. The Roman historian Plutarch tells one story in particular. Cleopatra sails down the Nile on her royal barge, the sails soaked in rose oil and cinnamon. She doesn't need horns or trumpets. You smell her arrival long before you see her silhouette against the sun. The air around her becomes prophecy. By the time you see her, it's too late. You're already under her spell. She didn't just wear scent. She studied it like scripture. Cleopatra believed a fragrance could sway the heart, summon sleep, bend the will, perhaps even twist fate. And she wasn't wrong. Long before the word aromatherapy ever filled a medical scroll, she had mastered its sacred rhythm. But for Cleopatra, perfume wasn't simply a flirtation of flowers and oil. It was a weapon, a coded message, a form of diplomacy you didn't hear, you breathed. When she first stood before Julius Caesar, and later Mark Antony, she didn't rely on chance or beauty alone. She arrived in a symphony of scent, every note composed with intent. Frankincense in sacred spaces, neroli at feasts, musk and spikenard whispered across silk pillows behind closed doors. She didn't seduce with words, she seduced with air. There's a tale, likely myth, of a general who forgot his own name after inhaling a perfume she crafted. Perhaps not literal truth, but it speaks to her legend, the woman who made memory itself kneel with scent. No other ruler wove perfume into policy like her. To Cleopatra, a vial of oil was more than luxury, it was strategy. Perfume was her language, invisible, but unforgettable. So tonight, if your room is quiet, let your imagination drift. Picture her walking past. You won't hear her, but perhaps you'll catch a wisp of rose, cinnamon, honey on the breeze, and that will be enough. Now, follow that scented wind as it curls westward over the sea, past sandstone ruins, toward the marble courtyards of Greece and Rome, lands of scrolls, statues and philosophies etched in sun. But we're not here for debate tonight. We're here for fragrance. The ancient Greeks approached scent not as vanity, but as virtue. Aroma was believed to mold behavior, cleanse the spirit, even stabilize the soul. The physician Hippocrates, a man who measured health in balance and breath, urged aromatic baths, massages with rosemary oil, and sandalwood for serenity. To him, scent was medicine, myrrh purified, cypress steadied, but not all were convinced. Plato, philosopher of ideals and restraint, sniffed at the idea of perfume. He thought it softened character, dulled discipline. To him, a true thinker should smell like olive oil, and wisdom, not jasmine and temptation. Naturally, no one listened. The Greeks still wore wreaths of lavender and mint during banquets and athletic games, not just for charm, but to keep the mind clear. At weddings, funerals, festivals, scent marked time, mood, passage. Then came the Romans. And as Rome did with many Greek things, it took fragrance and turned it up. Everything was perfumed. Baths steamed with rose water, saffron dust-coated clothing. Even the floors of lavish feasts were scattered with powdered scent, so each footstep sent perfume swirling into the air. At opulent dinners, guests were anointed with oils between courses. Some noble households had fountains, not of wine, but of jasmine-scented water. The Emperor Nero, never one for subtlety, once had rose petals and myrrh rain from the ceiling during a feast. And yet, Roman excess bred Roman complaint. Seneca the Younger, a Stoic philosopher allergic to indulgence, grumbled that the baths no longer smelled like people, but like flower shops. Virtue, he wrote, does not wear perfume. Still, Rome ignored him. Perfume was love, ritual, power, and remembrance. Bottles of glass, alabaster, and clay-lined dressing tables, and were buried in tombs. Because scent wasn't just for the living, it was for legacy. Invisible, yes, but profound. The perfume bottle could whisper across decades, outlasting architecture. From Greece to Rome, fragrance lived in tension, luxury versus virtue, indulgence versus identity, but it never lost its power. One breath could shift a room, or make a moment last forever. Now, let's let the columns fall away. Let's travel backward, further, before scrolls, before statues, back to where rivers birthed empires and ziggurats reached for the sky, ancient Mesopotamia, Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, long before Cleopatra's scented sails, long before rosewater bathtubs in Rome. In the cradle of civilization, they were already in love with smell. Clay tablets from over 4,000 years ago reveal the earliest known perfume recipes. Formulas meant not for flirtation, but for gods and kings. Priests and perfumers used herbs, roots, and resins crushed, boiled, stirred into fat and oil with careful devotion. Myrrh, cypress, calamus root, cedarwood, each ingredient measured, each process documented. Not alchemy, not guesswork. Science written in cuneiform. Fragrance wasn't frivolous. It was holy. In Babylon, priests anointed the statues of deities daily, not with water, but with sacred oils. To leave a god unscented was to invite disorder. Fragrance upheld the cosmos. What smelled sweet was blessed. What stank was cursed. Even the hanging gardens, legendary or not, were filled with coriander, thyme, roses, not just for beauty, not just for food, but to scent the wind. The breeze itself was a form of authority. In Assyrian love rituals, men of status sent perfumed robes or scented scarves to lovers' messages without ink, declarations without voice. "I smell like wealth," they said. "I am worthy of memory." Scent was status in life, dignity in death. Burial rites included perfumed oils, tombs filled with fragrant jars. The body bathed one final time, not just to preserve, but to send it gently into the afterlife. And always there were the traders. Babylonian merchants hauled myrrh across deserts, exchanged sandalwood with India, ferried cinnamon to Egypt. The perfume trade was among the first global networks, a silent commerce of longing, faith, and elegance. A single ounce of frankincense? Sometimes worth more than gold. Now, let the spice-laced air settle. Let the clay cool. Let your footsteps carry you slowly into the heart of ancient Egypt. In Egypt, perfume wasn't a luxury. It was a passage, not just a pleasure, but a path from this world to the next. Fragrance wasn't for the living alone. It was for the dead, for the divine, for the journey through eternity. And so, in this ancient land of sky-bound temples and sun-warmed stone, the art of embalming evolved into the highest and holiest perfumery. The process was intricate, almost sacred theatre. The body was first washed, not with mere water, but with palm wine. Not to clean, but to cleanse, to drive out impurity. Then came natron, a chalky salt drawn from Egypt's desert lakes, used to dry and preserve. But here is where the fragrance began its quiet, solemn work. Once desiccated, the body was kissed with layer upon layer of precious oils, cedarwood, cinnamon, frankincense, myrrh, and juniper, each one selected not for scent alone, but for spirit. Frankincense was believed to banish malevolence. Myrrh, the bitter sap of desert thorns, stood for healing and resurrection. Cinnamon brought warmth to the flesh. These oils didn't just preserve, they transformed. Mummification was never just about halting decay. It was about elevation, lifting the body from the realm of rot into something sacred, something divine, something that smelled, quite literally, like a god. The gods, after all, were said to be fragrant, their breath perfumed, their very essence scented with purity. And so, to reach the afterlife, a soul had to smell worthy of paradise. Even the linen wrappings were scented, soaked in oils, wound around the body in spirals of ritual. Amulets were tucked between the folds, pressed against skin that would never feel again, but still mattered. In royal tombs, archaeologists have found sealed jars, still clinging to their perfume across the millennia, resin thick as honey, scents that have not vanished, only grown quiet with time. Perfume cones were worn atop wigs during funerary rites. Crafted from wax, infused with lotus, honey, and oil, they melted slowly in the sun, releasing their fragrance as the mourners wept and sang. It was sent as ceremony, as memory, as offering. To the ancient Egyptians, death did not smell like rot. It smelled of resin, of pine, of eternity. Now, let us shift from tomb to trail. Not the march of armies, but the meandering of caravans. Not thunder of war horses, but the creak of carts. The whisper of wind through sandalwood groves. This is the journey of perfume. The story of the spice roads, ancient arteries, pulsing with scent. Before perfumeries were shops, before bottles were glass, ingredients had to be sought, found, hunted. Cinnamon from Sri Lanka, myrrh from the Horn of Africa, spikenard from Himalayan valleys, frankincense from sun-blistered groves in southern Arabia. These were not simply exotic aromas, they were treasure. Babylon needed frankincense for its rituals. Egypt demanded myrrh for its mummies. Greece craved rose oil. Rome wanted everything, but none of these empires had all the pieces. So traders moved. Across deserts, through forests, over mountains and sea. Camels, oxen, slender ships, whatever, would carry the scent of sacred trees and sun-soaked flowers across continents. Their cargo was precious, fragile, sealed in clay pots or wrapped in goatskin. A single cracked jar could spell ruin, but a full one? Wealth beyond counting. In some eras, cinnamon was more valuable than silver, and harder to fake. Along these routes, knowledge flowed too. Methods travelled. Techniques evolved. In India, perfumers practiced early distillation. In Arabia, the art of enfleurage bloomed petals pressed into fat to extract their perfume. In Persia, fragrance fused with poetry, medicine, and mysticism. The air itself became a metaphor for paradise. By the time a vial reached Roman shores, it carried not just aroma but legend. A bottle of spikenard wasn't just rare, it was a story. A scent whispered across kings and prophets. Saints would one day be anointed with it. The roads stretching from China to the Red Sea, from the Indus Valley to the Mediterranean, weren't marked by maps. They were marked by smell. Step into a market in Damascus, and the air pulsed with cardamom, saffron, and amber. Turn a corner in Petra, and walls of rose petals and dried resin stared back at you. These cities didn't just sell scent, they breathed it. And now, follow me gently to a place where scent was never merely applied. It was adored. It was worshipped. Welcome to ancient India. Here, fragrance was braided into everything: prayer, medicine, love, philosophy. The oldest Hindu texts, the Vedas, speak of scent as offering. Camphor, ghee, and sandalwood were burned not to mask death, but to elevate life. Each curl of smoke was a gift to the gods. Smell was more than earthly. It was spiritual alignment. The most sacred was sandalwood, smooth, creamy, cool to the touch and soul. Ground into paste, it was smeared on the foreheads of priests, applied to temple idols, rubbed onto the bodies of the dead to help them journey on with grace. It calmed humans. It pleased the gods. Other sacred ingredients: vetiver, patchouli, jasmine-filled garlands and bowls, not merely for beauty, but for balance. Jasmine garlands at weddings weren't decorations. They were invocations, awakenings, invitations to divine love. In Sanskrit poetry, lovers describe one another not by height or hair, but by scent. Perfume wasn't bottled in shelves. It was born fresh. Petals soaked in sesame oil or coconut milk, blended slowly by hand, filtered through cloth so fine it caught even moonlight. Fragrance in ancient India wasn't a product. It was a ritual, a practice, a form of remembering and being remembered. Out of India's temples and gardens emerged something rare, not merely perfume, but attar, the distilled essence of flowers and wood, concentrated into oil, ancient and heady. These natural perfumes weren't just worn, they were revered, prized for their depth, complexity, and their quiet power to change more than mood. They could shift being. Yet perhaps the most remarkable quality of Indian perfumery was how closely it was tied to healing and awakening. In the philosophy of Ayurveda, each scent was a key, crafted to unlock balance in the body's vital energies, the doshas. Cooling vetiver calmed the overheated spirit. Cinnamon stirred the sluggish blood, lighting the fire within. Camphor cleared the mind. Jasmine stirred the heart. The nose, in this system, wasn't just for pleasure. It was the gateway to the brain, and therefore to consciousness itself. Fragrance wasn't surface. It was inner alignment. Incense was everywhere. Thin sticks of smouldering dupe rose like prayers in temple halls. Smoke coiled upward toward rafters and gods alike. In homes, families lit incense at daybreak and sundown, welcoming the sun in, ushering the night out. Millions still do. No fanfare, no spectacle, just scent and silence. Now we follow that smoke east, to ancient China, a world built on stillness, grace, and balance. In Chinese tradition, scent didn't shout. It whispered. It drifted like a brushstroke in the air. It wasn't flamboyant. It was a philosophy. Fragrance aligned you with the world, with yourself. While oils were considered too forward, too intense, incense reigned. It could be timed, measured, disciplined. A single coil of sandalwood burned for hours, tracking the movement of the day like a quiet clock. In Buddhist temples, monks used agar wood and sandalwood not just to purify the air, but to focus the mind. The smoke wasn't background, it was the anchor, a direction inward. Confucian scholars, too, believed no study was complete without a brazier burning nearby. Scent, they thought, readied the mind, prepared the soul. It wasn't adornment, it was entry. In Taoist practice, fragrance was qi, made visible the vital force of life. A room that smelled wrong meant something was out of alignment. Clove, cassia bark, and star anise weren't just aromatic, they were medicine, corrective, sacred. Even clothing was scented. Small embroidered pouches called xiangnang hung from the waist, filled with herbs like mugwort and patchouli. These weren't trinkets. They were protection against sickness, spirits, and misfortune. During the Tang and Song dynasties, they became tokens of affection, exchanged during festivals like perfume-filled letters. Poets used scent the way painters use light. The great tongue era verses evoke seasons not by sound, but by smell plum blossoms for spring, old pine wood, and leaf mulch for autumn. A beloved wasn't described by face or gait, but by the trace of scent left behind. Fragrance was a form of memory. And now we inhale one final breath, a breath pulled across empires, down into crypts, through the spice-laden halls of markets, the sanctified hush of temples. We return to the present. But scent refuses to stay behind. Much of the knowledge of ancient perfumery has disappeared, burned, buried, guarded. The formulas were passed in whispers, sealed in scrolls, etched on clay lost to time, flame, and conquest. The great libraries of Nineveh and Alexandria once held treatises on fragrance. None survived intact. And yet, traces remain. In 2012, archaeologists uncovered a perfume workshop in Cyprus, the clay still scorched, the vats still coated with olive oil and lavender. In Egypt, tomb jars yielded residues of myrrh, cinnamon, and lotus. In Israel, scholars try to rebuild the sacred temple incense of old, the Ketoret piece by piece, note by note. Even Cleopatra's perfumes have been reborn. In 2019, researchers reconstructed one of her signature blends. Using residue from ancient bottles and texts, they created a scent thick, resinous, spicy, earthy, not modern, not floral, but unforgettable. Like her. Perfume, you see, is memory suspended in oil. It tells no story aloud, but it holds you. One drop, and you're back beneath Egyptian stars, or in a Roman bathhouse, or kneeling before a smoking altar in the hills of India. The descendants of those ancient scents still live. Agarwood still burns in Chinese monasteries. Myrrh and frankincense are still carried in trade, as they were in Babylon. Rose oil is still precious, still pressed with care. And the idea that scent is sacred? Still alive. You light incense before meditation. You spray perfume before a date. You wash your grandmother's hands in rosewater. You think it's modern, but it's ancient, and always will be. It began, as many powerful things do, not with a shout, but with a whisper. Not the clank of chains, not the bark of soldiers. Just one voice, quiet, insistent, passed from hand to hand, from lip to ear. A direction. North. Some houses were just homes. Others were miracles in disguise. Barns with trapdoors, kitchens with false floors, wagons hollowed beneath crates of apples. These were the lifelines of freedom masked in plain sight, wrapped in silence and daring. This was the Underground Railroad. Not a railroad, not underground, but a living, breathing network of resistance and mercy, braided from courage and secrecy. Its routes were unwritten, its schedules were wordless, and yet it moved. Night after night, under moonlight and prayer, freedom seekers made their way north on foot, barefoot, bruised and relentless, guided by those who'd once fled themselves, or by free black Americans and white abolitionists who risked everything to help strangers disappear into liberty. The North Star was the only compass they could trust. Swamps, rivers, thick woods, these became both barrier and passage. They hid in haylofts, hollows, and root cellars. One wrong knock on one wrong door could end everything. Still, they ran. They ran because hope is louder than fear. The network grew not through maps, but through memory. A lantern in a window, a quilt hanging on a line, a flower blooming out of season. These were signals. A secret language sewn into everyday life. It wasn't organized. There were no headquarters, no leaders. Just people quietly brave, unspeakably bold, acting because their conscience left no other choice. And slowly, it stretched. From deep southern states like Mississippi and Georgia, up through Tennessee, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and beyond. Some made it as far as Canada, where U.S. law could no longer claw them back. Behind every escape was a constellation of heroes. Farmers who hid travelers in grain silos, teachers who whispered maps into stories, ministers who buried directions in sermons, families who served bread to the hungry and slept lightly every night, knowing a knock could bring gratitude or death. It wasn't rebellion. It was compassion, organized. And among all the conductors, one figure would become a force unto herself. She was small, barely 5 feet tall, scar on her skull, voice soft, gaze like iron. Harriet Tubman, born in chains around 1822 in Maryland, Harriet saw cruelty before she saw kindness. She was beaten, whipped, nearly crushed by the system that owned her. Once, an overseer threw a heavy iron weight at someone else. It struck her head instead. She survived, but never healed. The injury left her with narcoleptic spells, searing headaches, and vivid visions she interpreted as divine signs. In 1849, she escaped alone. She followed the North Star, moving through marshes and moonlight. She could have stopped there, but Harriet was not finished. She went back, again and again. Over the course of 10 years, Harriet Tubman made an estimated 13 trips back into slave states. She guided more than 70 enslaved people to freedom and never lost a single one, not one. That was not luck. That was brilliance. She carried a pistol not just to defend against slave catchers, but to ensure no one turned back. If you travelled with Harriet, you moved forward. Always. She was known as Moses not because she parted waters, but because she carried her people through darkness. And like Moses, she moved with faith, but also maps, timing, contacts, intelligence. She used songs to pass messages, bird calls to signal danger. A flicker of light meant move. Silence meant wait. She became so effective, so feared, that Southern authorities put a 40-0 bounty on her head, an astronomical sum at the time. No one ever collected. No one ever betrayed her. Later in life, she became a nurse, a scout, a Union spy, a suffragist. But it was those nights on the Underground Railroad that wrote her into history not as a legend, but as a lesson. She didn't free a nation. She refused to abandon a single soul. There were no maps with inked arrows, no billboards declaring freedom this way. The railroad was memory passed from tongue to ear, every turn memorized, every hiding place made to look like nothing at all. And yet, behind those modest facades, miracles lived. Some routes went through the tangled swamps of the Carolinas. Others followed the Ohio River, shimmering under starlight. Still others traced the winding valleys of Pennsylvania. The lucky ones reached Canada beyond the reach of American law. But getting there? A razor's edge. Slave patrols, bounty hunters, betrayal around every bend. The system responded with genius. Safe houses called stations were homes of farmers, preachers, Quakers, free black families, anyone willing to risk everything. Some built false staircases. Others installed trapdoors beneath floorboards. Carts with fake bottoms carried passengers in daylight. And the guides, conductors, were the lifeblood. They learned the land like it was language. They memorized which dog barked at strangers, which creek ran high after rain, which house had a red lantern in the attic. They did it all by heart, because no one dared write it down. The passengers, those fleeing bondage, had to trust completely. There was no second chance, no pause, no turning around. But how did they communicate? Code. A song sung softly in a cotton field might hold more meaning than 100 letters. Follow the drinking gourd. Wasn't just a melody, it was a roadmap, a cosmic compass. The drinking gourd was the Big Dipper. Its tail pointed north toward hope. Other songs carried warnings, or reassurances. A change in rhythm might signal a change in plan. A verse added on the fly might mean danger nearby. It was language wrapped in music, direction disguised as devotion. And it worked, because it had to. Because even in the darkest hours of American slavery, hope found its way into sound, into smoke, into footsteps moving northward under cover of stars. A song in the field wasn't just a song. A pattern on a quilt was never just for beauty. A star stitched into cloth, a lantern in the window, a flower pot placed just so these were messages. Signals. They looked like anything, and they meant everything. The drinking gourd. It wasn't a jug. It was the Big Dipper. Its handle pointed to the North Star, the guiding light above the trees, above the fear. a compass in the sky. Quilts draped on fences held silent maps. A star meant direction. A log cabin meant shelter. A zigzag warned of danger. Everything was hidden, and yet it all pointed the way. This wasn't luck. It was deliberate. It was brilliant. A map not of roads, but of faith and footsteps passed through memory, guarded by silence, and written in human instinct. A system designed not by architects or soldiers, but by those with everything to lose and nothing else left to risk. But freedom came at a staggering price. For those who ran, the cost wasn't just measured in miles, but in fear, silence, and sacrifice. After 1,850, the law itself turned against them. The Fugitive Slave Act allowed bounty hunters to capture escaped slaves anywhere, even in free states. It forced citizens to assist in the capture. It punished kindness with jail time. It turned northern streets into hunting grounds and made no room for mercy. People who had lived free for years, who had children, jobs, church pews, could be dragged back into slavery simply because someone claimed they fit the description. It didn't matter how far you had come. Danger always followed. Slave patrols scoured the woods. Dogs sniffed for human scent. Posters described skin tones, scars, heights, and promised money in return. Enough money to tempt a neighbour, a colleague, a stranger on the road. Still, they ran, because the alternative was to stay in chains. Families were often split. A mother might flee with one child, whispering a promise to come back for the others. Some kept that promise. Some never could. The journey was brutal. If caught, there was no mercy. Whipping, branding, imprisonment, sale, death. And it wasn't just the runners who paid the price. The ones who opened their doors, too, they were hunted. Conductors were heroes and targets. People like Levi Coffin, a white Quaker merchant in Indiana, who helped more than 0 escapees. His home was raided, his name slandered, his life always at risk. For black conductors, the risk was even greater. A free black person helping someone flee could be accused of being a fugitive themselves and kidnapped into slavery. Imagine helping someone into freedom, only to be stolen into bondage yourself. It happened, and entire communities paid the price. Some safe houses were torched. In other towns, those suspected of aiding fugitives were attacked, driven out, or worse. Still, they didn't stop. Because for them, the question wasn't, is this legal? It was, is this right? These weren't trained revolutionaries. They were farmers, teachers, blacksmiths, preachers, mothers with flour still on their hands, children barely old enough to read, ordinary people, with extraordinary courage. They didn't carry swords. They carried blankets, bread, directions etched in memory. They didn't march with banners. They whispered in hallways, tapped on windows, left doors unlocked. What made the Underground Railroad so powerful was not its size, or speed, or structure, but its humanity. It was built on trust, on risk, on love greater than fear. It ran on prayer, not steam, and every night it moved. What made the Underground Railroad remarkable wasn't just that it existed. It was that it endured. Despite the cost, despite the danger, despite the weight of laws, whips, and fear, it kept going. Every lantern lit in a window was an act of rebellion. Every open door was a revolution cloaked in kindness. And every footstep northward was a decision to face danger willingly again and again for something bigger than fear, freedom. In the heart of many black communities, north and south, there stood a building that meant more than hymns and sermons, a place that breathed strategy and defiance beneath its sacred walls. The Black Church. It wasn't just a sanctuary. It was a fortress. It was a flame. For those running toward freedom, and for those helping them escape, the church became compass, refuge, and resistance all under one roof. Slave owners allowed certain religious gatherings, but only with eyes watching. Unsupervised worship was feared, especially when songs, those Negro spirituals, began to carry something more than faith. They weren't wrong to worry. The songs were coded. Swing low, sweet chariot. It wasn't just about heaven. It was about movement. A message. the chariots coming. A conductor, a wagon, a chance to flee. Wade in the water wasn't just a baptismal lyric. It was tactical, a warning. Walk through rivers to throw off the scent. The hounds can't follow where the water runs. These songs, sung in fields or whispered in churchyards, seemed gentle, harmless. Overseers heard lullabies, but for the enslaved, they were blueprints stitched in melody. Underneath the sanctuary, especially in northern towns, church basements became hiding places. Beneath hymnals and choir robes were beds, bread, and freedom maps etched in memory. Ministers became messengers. Their sermons, layered with scripture and subtext, were operational briefings in disguise. Biblical references served as warnings. Exodus meant it was time. A psalm about the sea hinted at a river crossing. In Philadelphia, Mother Bethel AME Church, the first African Methodist Episcopal church in the country, became a hub of abolitionist activity. Its walls echoed with sermons and footsteps heading north. In Ohio, border churches earned reputations as stations, not just places of worship but waypoints in the night. Even in the deep south, where danger shadowed every breath, enslaved people carved out spaces of hope. They called them hush harbors, hidden in woods, away from plantations and prying eyes. These were sacred clearings, filled with whispers, prayers, and plans. Under the canopy of trees, far from the ears of slave catchers, songs and strategy mixed. They used rhythm to remember. They used rhyme to retain instructions too dangerous to write down. Because in that world, reading could cost you your life, but a song could keep you alive. The church gave more than food or shelter. It gave something rarer, voice. It gave songs. It gave community. It gave hope, harmonized, memorized, and passed from one soul to another, like a torch that couldn't be extinguished. So when night fell and the fields went still, voices would rise. Soft, layered, careful. It sounded like praise, but it was also a plan, a coded message hidden in devotion. The Underground Railroad wasn't owned by any one group, no single race, no single region. It belonged to everyone who dared to believe that slavery could be defied not just by laws or armies, but by people. Quiet people, bold people, people who opened doors when it was easier to look away, people who sang freedom in a key no oppressor could hear. The Underground Railroad wasn't a machine. It was a heartbeat, a fragile rhythm kept alive by a constellation of strangers. Farmers, ministers, schoolteachers, sailors, shopkeepers, people bound together not by politics or power, but by something weightier, the belief that no human being should live in chains. They risked their safety. They risked their homes. Some risked their lives. All for one cause, freedom. Some names we remember, like William Still, a free black man in Philadelphia, often called the father of the Underground Railroad. As chairman of the Vigilance Committee, he didn't just help escapees. He wrote their names down, recorded their dates, their stories, their hopes, not for glory, but so that, maybe, one day, a mother might find her lost child again. His records are now among the most important historical documents we have. Then there was Levi Coffin, a white Quaker merchant in Indiana. His home, which he shared with his wife Catherine, became known as the Grand Central Station of the Underground Railroad. Hidden compartments, secret rooms, always an extra pot of stew. When urged to stop, he simply said, "I knew my duty." But for every William or Levi, there were hundreds more whose names we'll never know. Women who stitched disguises by candlelight, children who watched from the window and rang bells in warning, dock workers and sailors who hid fugitives in the belly of ships, innkeepers who tucked keys beneath stones or maps inside bread loaves. Abolitionist newspapers smuggled coded updates in editorials. Couriers ran letters full of symbols and invisible ink. Some white Southerners helped fugitives escape under the noses of their own kin. Not everyone agreed. Not on religion, not on politics. But they didn't need to be saints. They didn't need to be right about everything. They just had to act. And they did. The Underground Railroad wasn't run by governments. It had no charter, no funding, no army. It was fueled by ordinary people doing the right thing quietly, again and again. No reward, no recognition. Just one more unlocked door, one more meal handed over, one more whisper, "Go now." Then silence. They vanished into history, but left freedom in their wake. And for those who rode the rails of the invisible northbound tracks, freedom didn't always arrive at the first gate or the last safe house in Pennsylvania. It came farther. It came at the border. Not a line on a map, but a line between survival and capture, between being hunted and being home. Canada. By the early 1800s, it had become the true north for those fleeing the American South. A sanctuary beyond US reach, beyond the cruel extension of slave law. After the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, even free states became hunting grounds. Bounty hunters could capture escapees from nearly anywhere. No warrant, no proof, just an accusation. Freedom became fragile, unless it lay beyond the border, so they kept going. They crossed rivers. They slipped through forests. They waited for darkness, for fog, for ice. Some bribed ferrymen. Others walked across frozen lakes under moonlight. Each step was a wager, but they came anyway. By many estimates, 30 to 40 formerly enslaved people reached Canada. Some settled in Ontario in border cities like Detroit, Buffalo, and towns that became waypoints to safety. Once across, they could breathe. Not easily, not always safely, but legally, and that mattered. In Windsor, St. Catharines, Buxton, and Toronto, entire communities took root. Black Canadians opened schools, started churches, built businesses, published abolitionist newspapers, founded civil rights societies. They didn't just rebuild their lives, they reached back for those still in chains. Harriet Tubman herself made her home in St. Catharines, Canada, her safe harbour after years of midnight journeys and bloodless battles. She didn't rest. She organised. She watched. She remained ready. Because freedom, for her, was never personal. It was collective. And it wasn't finished. St. Catharines wasn't just a hiding place. It was a launch pad. Harriet Tubman lived there for several years, not to disappear, but to return. Over and over again, she used her new freedom as a base for bold missions back into danger. Canada wasn't the finish line. It was the beginning of her next chapter. But even in freedom, life was not easy. Though slavery had ended under British law by 1834, racism did not. Black settlers in Canada faced segregated schools, the harshest jobs, the cold shoulder of prejudice. They were denied homes, denied respect. But they were not bought, not sold, not hunted. And that difference meant everything. Now imagine the moment. Your bare feet land on foreign soil. Your breath is shallow, your heart still pounding from the run. You turn. Behind you the river, the south, the shadows of a past you refuse to carry anymore. Ahead, no master, no overseer, no one to claim your name, your labour, or your children. For the first time in your life, the stars overhead are yours. You are free. The Underground Railroad didn't just save lives. It shook a nation. With every person who vanished into freedom, a message was delivered to the American South. You don't own us anymore. To enslavers, each escape wasn't just a loss of labor. It was a fracture in their system. A crack in the foundation of their wealth, their laws, their illusion of control. Their power relied on one brutal myth, that people could be property. But every footstep north said otherwise. So the South pushed back. Wanted posters became common, 100 for a girl, 500 for a man, 0 for a family, dead or alive. Slave catchers roamed freely, both sanctioned by law and hired by greed. Some carried forged papers, others relied on lies. Free black citizens were snatched off northern streets and sold back into bondage. To tighten the grip, Congress passed a monstrous law, the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. It empowered bounty hunters to operate anywhere, even in abolitionist strongholds. It forced law enforcement in free states to assist in captures. Judges were paid double if they ruled in favor of the slaveholder. If you helped someone escape, if you gave them bread, water, a bed, you could be fined, imprisoned, ruined. Free cities, Boston, Philadelphia, Cincinnati, became battlegrounds. Mobs broke into courthouses. Vigilante groups rescued captives before they were dragged south in chains. The South painted it all as theft. Pro-slavery newspapers screamed about abolitionist conspiracies, about stolen property, about whispers of rebellion. These rumors weren't harmless. They were used to justify raids, floggings, even executions in enslaved communities. Still, the railroad pressed forward. The louder the opposition grew, the more determined its defenders became. They built tighter networks, dug tunnels, hollowed walls. Signals changed, messages evolved. Some conductors moved farther north into deeper Canadian wilderness, staying ahead of the law's long reach. What the backlash revealed wasn't weakness. It was strength. Every escape inspired another. Every raid sparked resistance. Every battle over one man's freedom brought the entire country closer to collapse, closer to war. The nation didn't break all at once. Before cannon fire echoed at Antietam or Gettysburg, before Lincoln's signature dried on the Emancipation Proclamation, before generals and battle flags changed the shape of the Republic, there were torches in the dark, footsteps in the night, songs hummed between rows of cotton. There was a woman holding a child's hand, whispering, "We're almost there." There were people, ordinary people, refusing to obey the law, and choosing instead to follow conscience. Freedom didn't begin on a battlefield. It began on foot, in secret, and in defiance. The Underground Railroad was never brick and mortar. No gleaming statue, no carved granite plaque, no ribbon-cutting ceremony. It did not rise with trumpets or parades. Instead, it threaded through shadow and silence through fields after midnight, cabins with unlocked doors, and hands extended without question. It left no blueprints, and yet it was everywhere, etched not into marble but into memory, traced not on maps but across stars and hearts. It was a secret woven into quilts, hummed into songs, coded into flowers in windows, and lamps burning low at dusk. It moved like breath, invisible but essential. Today, we try to capture that whisper. We build centers, preserve safe houses, mark roads. You can visit the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad Visitor Center in Maryland. You can stand before the exhibits at the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center in Cincinnati. But these places, as noble as they are not the railroad. They are echoes. The real legacy lives deeper. It lives in the simple truth that ordinary people, facing monstrous cruelty, chose to resist not with weapons or laws, but with love. They used their hands to feed, their roofs to shield, their silence to save lives. They didn't ask, "What can I do?" They asked, "What must I do?" That's the lesson that endures, not just that freedom is precious, but that it is possible. And that courage doesn't always wear armor. Sometimes it stands in the cornfield in the moonlight, hand outstretched, saying, "This way, just a little further." The spirit of the railroad lives on. In every act of defiance against cruelty, in every voice that shields the vulnerable, in every soul who refuses to be quiet while others suffer. Because injustice still walks the earth. It doesn't always wear chains, but it's there in laws that divide, in systems that forget, in silence that protects the wrong. And so too must we walk, and guide, and whisper, "Follow me, you're almost free." I.D. Now the snow begins to fall. We leave the South's firelit resistance and step into the stillness of the far north where stories don't shout, they breathe. This is not Olympus, not Valhalla. This is the world of the Inuit. And here, mythology doesn't crash like thunder. It rises slow and steady like steam curling from a seal oil lamp. You don't read Inuit myths in leather-bound books. You remember them because they are sung, whispered, told over crackling fires in the middle of endless night, carried from one breath to the next through generations. Inuit people have lived in the Arctic for thousands of years across Greenland, northern Canada, and Alaska. A land where the sun sometimes vanishes for weeks, where the cold bites through bone, where silence isn't empty, it listens. And in this world, mythology is not fiction. It is guidance. Every tale is a survival manual wrapped in spirit. A myth is not a distraction, it is instruction. How to hunt with honor, how to travel with wisdom, how to listen when the wind speaks. Because here it does. The world around you is alive. The ocean breathes. The ice remembers. The animals see your soul. Unlike many mythologies where gods float above humans, far removed and mighty, the spirits of the Inuit are personal. They are neighbors. Sometimes helpers, sometimes tricksters, sometimes judges, but always present. There is no line between the natural and the supernatural. It all flows together like drifting snow. Stories were told not to entertain, but to remember how to live and how to stay alive. A tale about a raven wasn't just mischief, it was strategy. A story about a drowned seal's spirit wasn't just spooky, it was a warning. Always give thanks. Always offer respect. The earth is not yours. You share it. Inside snow houses, elders would speak in low, steady tones. Children wrapped in furs would press close, listening not just to the words, but to the silences between them. The way the wind sighed outside was part of the story. The way the fire flickered gave rhythm. Time didn't matter. No one was in a hurry. A single story might stretch over one night or 10. It would shift each time, shaped by the moment, the memory, the teller's breath. And that was the point. Inuit mythology isn't a system. It's not a pantheon with clear family trees and epic wars. It's a constellation of echoes spread across peoples, dialects, villages. Some stories differ, some names change, but the core themes remain: balance, respect, listening. The stories are built to remember not just the past, but the lessons for the now. Because here in the Arctic, survival is not a battle against nature. It is a dance with it. And you don't dance with arrogance, you dance with reverence. You move softly. You give back. You listen. You tell the stories because one day, someone else will need them to survive. Beneath the thick, frozen ceiling of the northern sea, a place where no sunlight dares to linger, and the silence hangs like a held breath, a presence waits. She is not a queen with jewels. She is not a goddess wrapped in robes of glory. She is something older, more wounded, more furious, more sacred. She does not rule with a crown, she rules with sorrow, and her name is whispered through teeth chattering with cold Sedna. She is not myth in the way southern tales imagine myth. She is not lofty, she is not gentle. She is the pulse beneath the ice, the ache in the tide, the mother of every beast that swims the ocean's dark veins. The fish, the walrus, the whale, all spill from her severed hands. In Inuit lore, she is not merely remembered, she is feared, respected, mourned, and appeased. She is the ocean's vengeance. She is the memory of pain. She is the price of survival. They say Sedna was once just a girl, ordinary, unremarkable. A daughter to a father who would soon betray her in the worst way a parent can. In some villages, they whisper that she turned down every suitor who came for her hand. Too proud, too stubborn, or simply knowing that none of them deserved her? No one agrees. Others say she was deceived, married to a bird or a dog spirit disguised as a man, carried off in trickery, caged in feathers or fur. Her father, perhaps guilty, perhaps ashamed, set out to bring her back. But the sea is not forgiving. It sees lies like glass. It raised a storm. Waves towered. Winds howled. The small boat rocked. And then it happened. Sedna, clinging to the side, screaming for help, begging not to drown, and her father, gripped by fear, took a knife. He cut off her fingers. One by one. Each piece slipped into the sea and transformed into seals, into whales, into fish that would feed her people. And she did not die. She became. Now she dwells in a kingdom of pressure and silence, deep beneath the Arctic Ocean, her hair matted with seaweed, her face unreadable, her gaze ancient. The hunters know, if the animals vanish, if the sea turns silent, it is because she is angry. And when she is angry, no one eats. To bring back the bounty, a shaman must dive not physically, but spiritually. They enter trance, drifting down into the deep, down to her realm. They must find her. They must comb her hair, speak gently, show remorse. Only then might she loosen her grip and release the animals once more. She is power carved from pain. She is rage transformed into creation. And she is why you must always, always give thanks when the sea provides. Not out of politeness, out of necessity, out of survival, out of deep, shaking respect. Because Sedna watches, she listens, and she remembers. In the Arctic, animals are not prey. They are not game. They are elders, guardians, spirits clothed in fur, feather, and fin. You do not kill them, you ask. You honor. You do not take more than needed. Because they are not just creatures, they are beings with souls, with intent, with memory. This belief runs through every tale the Inuit tell stories where seals shed their skins to walk as women, where birds become husbands, where foxes whisper warnings and wolves weep. These are not fables. They are truth wrapped in metaphor. Some animals walk in both worlds. They shift shape, they change faces, they test your humility. And none more cunning than the raven. He is the joker, the meddler, the light-bringer, and the chaos stirrer. Sometimes he's a hero, stealing the sun and flinging it across the sky so light can return to the earth. Other times, he rearranges rivers or tricks children for no reason at all. He is not evil, but he is not safe. He reminds us. Nature owes us nothing. It follows no map but its own. Then there is Nanak, the great polar bear, not just a predator, but a soul wrapped in white muscle and quiet breath. To hunt him is not a victory. It is a ritual, one that demands prayer, ceremony, return of the bones, and whispered thanks. If you forget, if you disrespect, the ice itself may turn against you. Because every creature has an inua, a soul, a spirit essence. When you take the life of a seal, you do not walk away untouched. You carry something now, a weight, a bond. If you take without care, the animals will speak to Sedna. And she will close her hand. They say if you walk alone across the snow-blind expanse of the Arctic, and the wind suddenly dies, don't speak. Not because of wolves, not because of frostbite, but because something older may be listening. It might wear fur. It might wear silence. It might wear your own name. In the world of the Inuit, you are not the apex predator. You are not the master of the earth. You are a visitor, and the world you walk on, the animals you eat, the ice you cross, the sky you pray under, all belong to spirits far older than stories. And some of those spirits remember everything. The raven, sharp-eyed, sharp-tongued, may one day return wearing a man's coat, knocking at your door with a grin and a question. Did you laugh at me once? The seal you hunted may drift back in your dreams, or worse, in your shadow. Inuit stories are not there to charm. They are warnings wrapped in wonder. They whisper one truth. You are never alone. Children are taught early. Never leave bones exposed, never mock a creature, and never ever waste what was taken from the land or sea. Spirits are not somewhere out there. They are here behind the snowdrift, under the ice, inside the animal's eye. Even the wind watches. Even silence hears. And when the balance is broken, when seals disappear from the hunting grounds, when fish go still, when illness slips into a family's breath, there is only one path left. The villagers call for the one who walks both worlds. Not a priest, not a prophet, but something far older. They call the Angakuk. These shamans do not wear crowns. They wear isolation. Their hands may tremble. Their dreams might rattle the walls. They are chosen not by votes but by signs, visions at birth, brushes with death, dreams that bloom in darkness. The Angakuk is healer, storyteller, seer and bridge. When medicine fails and weather disobeys, it is the Angakuk who is summoned. But they do not pack bags. They do not consult charts. They take a drum. They close their eyes. And they leave. Not physically, spiritually. Through chance, breath, and trance, they slip beneath the skin of the world. They travel not by map, but by memory and instinct, diving into the other world, a place where nothing is still and nothing lies. There, in those hidden realms beneath sea and sky, they encounter beings not meant for mortal eyes. The angry dead, the animals who were taken without thanks, the ones who were left unnamed, unloved. And sometimes they find her, Sedna, hair in knots, heart wrapped in salt, her fury tied to hunger, to drought, to cold. Only the Angakuk can approach. Only they can comb her hair literally or symbolically, speak the right words, offer the right gestures, and beg for the world above to be forgiven. It is not performance, it is sacrifice. But this power comes at a cost. Many Angakut live on the edge of their villages, respected, but feared. They speak with eyes that have seen too much. They carry burdens nobody else can. Some hear whispers when no wind blows. Some speak in riddles, or sing in sleep. A few, the unlucky few, never come back from their spirit journeys. Their minds dissolve into the dream, or worse, they return changed. And those who use the spirits for selfish gain, they are not honoured. They are avoided. Their names become curses. No one speaks them aloud. Still, when crisis strikes, when a child cries without cause or the ice groans without warning, the village returns to the old ways. They light the fire, they call the Angakuk, and they listen. Because even in the modern world, even when snowmobiles outnumber sled dogs, there are things we do not question, and one of them is this: the dead are never far. In Inuit belief, there is no steel wall between life and death. The dead drift nearby as memory, as presence, as pressure in the air. Most are calm, most rest. But some are restless. They are known by many names. Some call them Tungite. Others say Angiat. What matters is not the label, it's what they bring. Cold, confusion, illness, misfortune. They are not ghosts in the European sense. They are not always visible. They are responses, consequences of broken promises, forgotten taboos. And there are many. Never whistle at the aurora. The northern lights are said to be spirits dancing, and your whistle might call them down. Never cook certain animals together, their spirits might clash. Never speak the name of the recently dead. Until the proper time has passed, they might not yet have let go. These taboos are not superstition. They are agreements, ancient, unspoken, spiritual contracts with the world itself. Break one, and the price may come in the night. A sickness with no cause. A storm out of season. A shadow that won't leave. Burials too follow these rules. They are done with care. The deceased are not just laid to rest, they are guided. Tools, tokens, even favourite items are left with the body not as keepsakes, but as offerings, as messages. We remember, we honour, we let you go, because if they are forgotten, they return, sometimes in dreams, sometimes in hunger, sometimes in the soft hush just before the dogs begin to growl. And so the Arctic teaches its children not just how to survive, but how to respect. Every seal has a spirit. Every raven has a memory. Every gust of wind might be a voice. You are not king here. You are not conqueror. You are a visitor, welcomed, but watched. And the stories? They're not just stories. They're instructions for how to live, how to behave, how to listen when even the sky seems to whisper, remember who came before you. In the land of endless night and whispering ice, even the graves do not sleep. Beneath carefully stacked stones lie bodies not abandoned, but remembered, wrapped in fur, cradled beside knives, amulets, and tools, not as relics, not as keepsakes, but as companions for the journey beyond. For in the Inuit world, death is not an ending. It is a crossing. You leave with what you loved. You carry what you were. A blade to cut through unknown lands. A token to comfort the soul. If the grave is empty, the spirit may be too. And so, the dead are never sent alone. But even when honoured, even when wrapped with song and snow and sacred silence, some spirits do not stay buried. Some return. A mother, perhaps, who once whispered lullabies, drawn back to protect her child. Or a hunter who left too soon, lingering near the camp to guide his kin through dreams. But others? They return not with love, but with unrest. The betrayed. The forgotten. The ones whose names were spoken too soon or never spoken at all. Their presence is rarely obvious. A flicker against the tent wall. A creak in the ice when no one is walking. a cough that will not heal, a cold that dances just out of reach of the fire. And when this happens, the people do not shout. They do not panic. They call the Angakuk. Through chant, trance, and offering, the shaman listens for the dead, sometimes soothing, sometimes bargaining, sometimes simply bearing witness. But not all spirits can be appeased, and not all dangers can be banished. In such moments, the only shield is silence. Words are weighed. Laughter is held back. Night is treated with respect, because in the Arctic, the past does not rest. It walks. It watches. It waits. And above it all, far above the ice and the bones and the prayers, the sky stirs. Not with thunder, not with stars, but with light. Curtains of green, violet, and crimson sweep across the heavens, dancing like flame, whispering like wind. The aurora borealis to outsiders, a spectacle of science. But to the Inuit, a sky alive with memory. These are not just lights, they are souls. Some say they are the spirits of the departed, laughing as they dance across the sky, celebrating their release from the earth. Others say they are hunters of old, torches in hand, lighting the heavens as they chase celestial prey. Still others whisper of children lost too young, playing forever in the stars, kicking around a walrus skull as their toy of eternity. But whatever their form, one thing is certain: the lights are never meaningless. When they swirl too fast, when they flash too bright, the elders grow quiet. They know what it could mean: a warning, a sign of imbalance in the human world. Perhaps someone forgot an offering. Perhaps a taboo was broken. The spirits notice what we forget. So, the people watch, and they teach. Never whistle at the lights. Not for fun, not for curiosity. It is said that a whistle calls the spirits close. Too close. Some say it might draw the aurora down, slicing cleanly, taking your head with it. Others say it opens a doorway, a passage from the world of the dead to the living. The Inuit do not fear the lights, but they do not take them lightly. They stand beneath the sky in silence, heads lifted, mouths closed, eyes wide, because this is not spectacle, this is presence. A reminder, a message, a gift. Even now, when satellites measure every wavelength and cameras capture every shimmer, the old belief remains that what dances above us is not just electrons or particles, it is ancestry in motion. And sometimes, that is enough, because not every miracle needs explaining. Some are meant only to be witnessed. And in the Arctic, there are nights when the lights ripple like breath, and the village grows still, not out of fear, but out of reverence, because the sky is speaking. And for once, we remember to listen. Now, return with me not to gods in golden halls or mountains split by fire, but to something quieter, older, the beginning. It was not a flash or a roar or a divine declaration. It was snow, silence, ice. No gods sculpting stars, no thunder forging rivers, only stillness, only breath, only possibility. The Inuit do not speak of creation as a singular act. There was no one hammer, one word, one god shaping everything. The world, they say, came slowly, bit by bit, spirit by spirit, breath by breath, and in that silence, a shape moved across the white. Tulugak the raven. Before there were names or nations, there was silence. Not the kind broken by breath or footstep, but a silence so vast it hummed thick as the ice, sharp as the wind, and then came a flicker, not of light, of intent. The world was about to wake, not with thunder or flame, but with a bird's clever trick, and everything, from moonlight to mountains, was never the same again. The Arctic was once a land drenched in endless dark. No sun, no stars, no moon to dance on snow. Raven, not just a bird, but a spirit cunning enough to rival the gods, grew weary of tripping over shadows, tired of guessing where the land ended and the void began. So, in a moment of mischief or genius or both, Raven stole light from a hoarder. No war, just one swift trick. And when he hurled it skyward, it shattered the sun blazing, stars spilling like diamonds, and the moon settling like a silver sigh. And just like that, The Arctic breathed in daylight and dream. Not all stories shine with Raven's wit. Some stomp, tower, shudder the earth. There are whispers of ancient giants, lonely and immense, who wandered the tundra before time kept score. They sculpted valleys with their palms, punched out lakes with their heels, and salted the oceans with tears heavy as glaciers. When they faded, their bodies became land, their sighs the wind that never sleeps. They didn't vanish, they became everything. Another tale? Two brothers, spirits quarrelling over creation itself. One sculpted the caribou, swift and wild as storm wind. The other frowned too fast, too clever, too hard to catch. So, he slowed them, softened them. Not ruined, just balanced. It wasn't a mistake. It was a compromise. In the North, perfection isn't the point, survival is. And survival is a constant negotiation between hunger and humility. To the Inuit, the world is not a finished masterpiece. It's still forming, still writhing in its own becoming. Every snowfall, every hunt, every storm is another verse in an ongoing saga. The land speaks through cracking ice, shifting tides, vanishing herds. And we, the humans, we are not rulers here. We are tolerated guests, allowed to stay only as long as we listen. Myths in the Arctic aren't bedtime stories. They're survival codes dressed as folklore. Every tale is wrapped around a pulse warning, guiding, anchoring, like the chilling legend of the Qualupiluit. No Hollywood monster here. She waits beneath the ice, cloaked in her parka, fingers long as regret, eyes bulging with ancient watchfulness. Children are warned. Wander too close to the cracks, and she'll rise silent, swift to drag you into the frigid hush forever. It's not a fairy tale. It's a mother's scream wrapped in myth. Stay close. Stay alive. And then there's the Mahaha, sounds like a joke, doesn't it? A giggling frost demon with fingers like icicles and a grin too wide to be kind. But laughter is its weapon. It tickles its victims into stillness. Absurd? Maybe. Effective? Always. Never underestimate the quiet. In the Arctic, even madness has a method. Even play has a price. But the true weight of Inuit myth sits not in the monsters, it's in the expectations. Gratitude, respect, ritual. A hunter who mocks his prey or wastes its flesh doesn't just risk hunger, he risks a haunting. The spirits of wronged animals return, sometimes in dreams, sometimes as weather, sometimes as silence so thick you feel it press against your ribs. They don't roar, they vanish. And nothing is more terrifying than absence in the north. Sedna, the sea goddess, betrayed and broken her rage, is the ocean's answer to greed. Forget your offering. Skip the ceremony, mock the kill, and Sedna will tighten her grip. The fish disappear. The seals dive deep and stay there. You don't defy Sedna. You beg her. You braid her hair in visions. You soothe her sorrow with chants, because her pain writes the tides. This isn't morality from books. This is morality carved from hunger and frostbite. This is wisdom measured in blizzards, not sermons. To outsiders, these myths may sound cruel, even strange, but they aren't cruel. They are clear. You don't need parchment when you've got permafrost. You don't need law when the land itself remembers every mistake. And so the stories echo not on stages or pages, but in the places between, in the hush before a blizzard, in the last breath of a dying caribou, in a child's shiver when they glance too long at a crack in the ice. The tale has already been told. And the lesson? It's waiting. The world has changed. The sled dogs have gone quiet, replaced by the growl of snowmobiles. Satellites drift overhead where once only auroras danced in whispered light. And the sky? It's no longer a mystery. Textbooks explain it now. Geomagnetic storms, ionized particles, solar winds brushing Earth's magnetic veil. And yet, the old stories remain. They have survived more than time. They've withstood colonization, the blades of assimilation, the silence imposed by residential schools. They've endured when languages were stolen, when relocations split families from ancestral land, when firelight was replaced with fluorescent bulbs and fire spirits were labeled fiction. But these stories? They are not gone. In Nunavut and beyond, Sedna still rises from stone, carved not just into soapstone sculptures, but into the memory of children. The Qualupiluit still waits beneath the ice, kept alive in the caution of grandparents' warnings. And the Mahaha? It still giggles not in the cold, but in music, in poetry, in rap verses that stitch ancient dread into modern beats. Inuit rappers, artists, and storytellers are breathing fresh fire into these tales not as souvenirs, but as survival maps. On community stages, trickster ravens still swagger, and polar bear spirits still slip between skins. The myths have not gone quiet. They've only learned to shift shape, just like the stories themselves. Because these aren't bedtime stories. They are not dust-covered folklore for museum shelves. They are weapons, shields, mirrors. They are identity, carved from grief, carried in bone, sharpened by survival. In a world where the ice thins and hunting paths blur, where climate change scrambles everything, ancient and sacred, these stories hold the line. They remind Inuit communities of who they are, where they come from, what they owe the land. And still, they evolve. Modern Inuit leaders and scholars are preserving not just the tales, but the rhythm of storytelling itself. Because stories spoken in colonial languages lose something vital. English does not carry the heartbeat of Inuktitut. It cannot fold silence into syllables. The power lies not just in the meaning of words, but in their breath, in how they sound when wrapped around a child's ear on a dark, snowbound night. Yet even in translation, the pulse remains. These are stories of resilience, of anguish, of frozen beauty. They don't coddle, they don't flatter. They teach you to survive, to respect, to remember. And while the outside world may label them as folklore, superstition, or relics of a fading culture, the Inuit know the truth. These stories are not old. They are unfinished. They are not gone. They are still breathing. So, if you ever find yourself far from traffic and towers, out in the Arctic, where the wind hums its ancient song and the stars feel close enough to touch weight, just for a moment, let the snow shift, let the ice groan, let the silence speak. You may hear a story, one that is not over, one that has been waiting patiently, powerfully for you.